Hello, today we're going to be talking about picking your first class in Wakfu. I'm going to talk a little bit about how to navigate the class selection screen and give a brief overview of each class. On the class selection screen, the two first things to go off of as a new player are the difficulty stars and the radar chart for each class. The difficulty stars are a pretty good measure of how generally difficult it will be to wrap your head around how a class works. You get a lot of new information thrown at you when you first begin playing, so you might do yourself a favor by picking a class that doesn't require memorizing 5 different effects for each spell when you're just trying to learn what all these little icons mean in the first place. That said, if you're a person who is very interested in a higher difficulty class, and you know you'll be patient enough to take your time and read how your spells work, there's no reason you can't learn one of the more difficult classes as a new player to the game. Next, we'll talk about the radar charts for each class. These charts give a general breakdown of what the class is good or bad at, while any abilities that score on the 3rd or 4th rung on the radar chart will appear as a roll next to the difficulty stars for a quick look. While some of the abilities on the chart are self-explanatory, let's quickly go over what each one means. Damage is the most obvious stat, representing the damage output of the class. Mobility is how easy of a time the class has moving around the map. Positioning is how easy of a time the class has moving other things around the map. Heals is how well a class can heal their allies. Protection is how well a class can provide defensive buffs to their allies. Support is how well a class can provide offensive buffs to their allies. You might notice that different classes don't seem to have a similar amount of points in the radar charts, but don't worry too much about that. Wakfu is a complex strategy game where unique abilities can be beneficial in a way that isn't represented well on a simple chart like this. I'll give a brief rundown on how each class plays, starting with the ones I would recommend most for new players. First is the Kra, Wakfu's ranger class. Kra's general strategy is to stay alive by staying out of their enemy's reach. They have devastating area of effect damage with their beacons, the ability to push and immobilize enemies to keep them from getting too close, and escape tools to help them get out of sticky situations. A Kra's greatest struggle may just be resisting the urge to blow up clumsy allies who get in the way of their explosive arrow. Next up is Sakrir, the Berserker class. Sakrir can be played as a glass cannon berserker that's always an inch away from death, an unkillable tank that provides ultimate protection for their teammates, or something between the two. Sakrirs have many tools to heal and protect themselves, along with incredible swap positioning abilities that can really shake up the map. The only thing they have to fear is their own greed for extra damage, leaving their HP a little too low. Third is Uganak, a dog. Uganaks are warriors with a rage mechanic that allows them to transform into a more powerful form for a limited amount of time. Uganaks are great at making life hard for their prey, removing their ability to run away and applying poisons that hurt them even if they do manage to escape. An Uganak isn't easy to get rid of either, as they're great at healing and protecting themselves. Uganaks are very self-sufficient and great at taking on fights by themselves, but they have limited tools to help their allies and be a team player. The fourth and final damage class among the 1-stars is the Assassin class, SRAM. At the time of recording, the SRAM class is due to be reworked soon, but it could still be the class for you. As SRAM is a very outdated class at this time, it is the simplest class in the game. The simple strategy of this simple class is to jump behind the enemy, deal tons of damage, and get out safely with their invisibility. SRAMs are pretty good at keeping themselves alive with self-healing and moderate mobility, so while they aren't as fancy as the newer and shinier updated classes, they can hold their own, and their simplicity can make it easier to focus on learning other things, like dungeon mechanics. Starting with one of the 1-star damage dealer classes would be the most recommended for a smooth start in Wakfu, but maybe you just really want to play as a healer or support. If that's the case, the 2 next classes might be the ones for you. Anaripsa is your standard healing class. They're great at healing their allies and looking cute, but they're not entirely harmless. While their primary job is healing, they can do a non-trivial amount of damage with their poisons, have potentially life-saving positioning options, some buffs for allies, and a few quite useful utilities. No team is going to dislike having an Anaripsa around keeping them safe and healthy. Anaripsas just need to hope that their team keeps them out of dangerous positions now and then, as they're not very mobile themselves. Pandawa is a panda-looking class that loves drinking bamboo milk. This is another class that, at the time of recording, is due for a revamp. Again, this isn't necessarily a reason not to pick the class, but it is something to be aware of. Pandawas are primarily played as a tanky positioner, but they can do respectable amounts of healing and passable amounts of damage too. They are, however, most generally valued by players for their precise positioning skills. They can pick up almost any fighter and throw them wherever they want. This ability is one of the most powerful abilities in the game if used correctly, as it can make allies' turns way more effective, save allies from danger, and deal with tricky dungeon mechanics quite easily. Playing this class effectively means being able to communicate with your allies about what they need and serving it to them on a silver platter. But I guess the 1-star difficulty score is about the throwing milk at people gameplay style. Those are all the 1-star difficulty classes according to the character select menu. These classes will be the easiest to learn while you're taking in all of the new information you're being confronted with, but if none of these classes are speaking to you, or you just want to learn about more classes, next up are the 2-star difficulty classes. Masquerader is the first all-arounder class we'll be talking about. With their masks, Masqueraders can fill pretty much any role they want in a team. While they might not hit as hard as some other classes, they make up for it with all sorts of great utilities, heals, protection, positioning, and a whole second turn. Masqueraders are typically played as damage dealers that push things into obstacles for extra damage, or supports that do anything a team happens to be lacking. With their clone, they're able to literally be in 2 places at once, which makes them highly flexible. Their different tools are too many to list here, but a Masquerader will always have something useful to provide the team, and if they don't figure it out on their turn, they'll surely figure it out on their second turn. Yops are bruisers that fight terrifying monsters with their bare fists, unless you use the sword animation set. Yops fight using a combo system based on using spells in a certain order. It can be a little dizzying trying to keep track of the combos at first, but with some training they become second nature. Yops will usually be using at least 10 abilities a turn by mid-game, which can make the class fun to play, but mechanically demanding. They are quite comfortable on the front lines with great self-sustaining tools, and will even buff nearby allies without having to go out of their way to do so. Yops deal some of the highest consistent damage per turn in the game, and fit well into any team because they're quite self-sufficient. Heliotropes are an alien race that summon portals to help them fight. While any fighter can step through their portals to get around the map, only Heliotropes can use abilities through the portals. Heliotropes are typically played as burst damage dealers, but can also be healers. Heliotropes have a lot of control over the map, connecting different parts of it together with their portals, effortlessly moving from one side to the other with their mobility skills, moving fighters as they please, and attacking from anywhere they want. Heliotropes' portals allow for otherwise impossible strategies, as having them around frees your team from being bound by the restraints of mundane physics. Osamotus is the class to pick if you wish you were playing Pokemon, Goemon, instead. Osamotus can capture a selection of creatures and use them in a battle against others. At the time of recording, there are 32 unique creatures the Osamotus can capture and command to fight for them. Using this range of different creatures, Osamotus have many different tools at their disposal. Osamotus are typically played as damage dealers, using their summons to deal a majority of their damage, or supports that provide positioning and an array of buffs, heals, and other utilities. They can also change into their dragon form and deal damage in an area around them if they ever feel like getting their own hands dirty. Pekas are protectors with incredibly strong damage reduction tools they use to keep their allies safe. While some choose to play them as damage dealers that burn their foes to death on their glyphs, they can be played in a somewhat pacifistic way, being an invaluable member to the team without ever laying a finger on the enemies. Pekas have all the tools they need to save their clumsy allies from themselves, with moderate mobility that allows the Feka to get where they're needed, positioning to get their friends out of trouble, and protection abilities, including one that can make the target completely impervious to damage for a turn. Fekas can also provide offensive buffs if their teammates can go a turn or two without needing saving. Seditas are tree huggers that like to play with dolls. They also like to poison their enemies to death, and if the poison takes too long for their liking, expedite the process by bludgeoning said enemies with the aforementioned dolls. While Seditas can be terrifying opponents to face, they are amazing allies that provide support to the team with great heals, a bit of positioning, buffs for their friends, and various other utilities. The battlefield to the Sedita is a garden to be dutifully maintained, planting seeds where they're needed and eliminating any unsightly weeds in the way. Enitrophs are treasure hunters that fight by throwing money or shovels at their problems, depending on if you use their second animation set. Many Unitrophes are played in a way where that's a moot point, however, as they choose to instantly turn into their Drillzerker form upon entering the fight. In the Drillzerker form, they're powerful close-range fighters that can use their immobilizing abilities to keep their target from escaping, while in their human form they can keep their enemies far away from them and their valuables. With help from their trusty Dreller companions, Unitrophes manage mines on the battlefields to give powerful buffs to themselves and their allies, or expose vulnerabilities in the enemies. Once in a while, they'll also be nice enough to share their healing treasure pouches with their allies. Rogues fight with a variety of weapons, including daggers, swords, whips, and their most iconic weapons, guns and bombs. They can switch between close-range and long-range combat modes, allowing them to always be a threat. While they won't be healing anybody else, a resourceful rogue is great at keeping their allies out of trouble with mindful positioning and the elimination of high-priority threats. With their high mobility and positioning abilities, rogues are able to pull off some explosive turns that have a huge impact once they've done a little prep work. They just need to be sure not to get caught in the blast themselves. And that's the end of the 2-star difficulty classes. Next up will be the 3-star difficulty classes, the most difficult to learn to play. Our first 3-star difficulty class is Akaflip. This ferocious feline is an all-arounder that is very welcome on any team. They have amazing support capabilities that are hard for any other class to rival. While they can be played as solid damage dealers, most Akaflip players opt to leave at least some room in their playstyle to take advantage of the strong buffing and healing capabilities of the class. Their gameplay revolves around managing a deck of tarot cards, so what tools they have each turn are randomized to a certain extent. To give a couple tarot card examples, the Akaflip might be able to summon an adorable Bao Meow companion that sheds through the enemy's defenses, or be able to escape to the safety of their cat tree if the situation is hairy. Foggernauts are robotic engineers that can create a winding rail system across the battlefield that they and their allies can traverse with ease. During the fight, Foggernauts invest in maintaining their turrets, which reward their efforts by providing the Foggernaut with extra damage, protection for them and their friends, or resources necessary to access their other powerful tools. While it might take Foggers a few turns to get established, once they get everything set up, they have access to huge amounts of mobility and can cause devastation with their turrets. Alternatively, they can be played as tanks that offer a lot of protection to their allies, even summoning blockades that take damage on their allies' behalf. Hupper Mages are scholars that have command over all 4 elements. Their spells have different effects based on what elemental runes they possess at the time, and their gameplay revolves a lot around managing these runes. An experienced Hupper Mage can effortlessly do just about anything a team could need, as they have almost every utility in the game, plus a few tools only they can access. For this reason, they'll fit comfortably into almost any group and can easily flex between damage dealers, healers, positioners, buffers, or debuffers on a turn-by-turn basis. While it might be tempting to simply use the required reading to play Hupper Mage as a weapon instead, learning the class is very rewarding and worth the effort. Zellers are the 18th and final class currently in Wakfu. They're high-mobility masters of time and space that can deal huge amounts of damage, reduce an enemy's ability to act, or allow themselves and their allies to take more actions in a turn. Zellers are also inventors and can summon a few mechanisms that help them in combat, the most prominent of which is a dial that allows the Zeller to freely move from hour to hour. They can also do whatever this nonsense is. They're typically played as frail damage dealers, but they can be played as supports that focus entirely on their positioning, buffing, and debuffing abilities. That's been a look at all the classes, but you might have a few that stood out to you and you're not sure which one to pick. I do have some good news and bad news about that. The bad news is that it's hard to really know what you're going to like without playing around with the class first in the game. But the good news is that you don't have to start over if you change your mind before you reach level 31. In the tutorial area of the game, the Celestial Island of Ree, you can change your class at no cost by talking to the NPC Huli. There's no limit to how many times you can do this, but you can do it if your character is inclusively between the levels of 1 and 30. You will keep all your progress and your character's name, and the only thing that will change is your class. A second piece of good news is that in the scenario that you don't want to or can't class change, if you're enjoying the game enough to have purchased a subscription, your second character will have a 2 times the XP bonus, your third character a 3 times the XP bonus, and so on, all the way up to a 6 times the XP bonus to your character if you have 5 other higher level characters on the account, making it easy to get any new characters up to speed. The third and possibly best piece of good news for an indecisive player is that you don't have to choose only one character. If you're playing on the multi-account servers including Rubelax, Neo-Rubelax, Pandora, or Neo-Pandora, you can play up to 3 different characters at the same time. That's about all I have to say in this video, and there's so much more I would have liked to say, but I'm going to be busy in the Neo server for the foreseeable future, and wanted to get this video out before the launch. If you have any questions about Wakfu, leave them in the comments and I'll answer them. See you in Neo Rubelax, and thanks for watching.